Hello everyone, my name is Kara Hettinger, and today I will be talking about the response of Canada thistle growth to diverse cropping rotations. Cirsium arvense, commonly known as Canada thistle, California thistle, or creeping thistle, is a noxious perennial weed that severely impacts organic agriculture across the state of Montana and into the northern Great Plains. Canada thistle is so problematic because it can spread not only by its seeds, but by a rhizomatous root system. This root system allows new propagules to sprout from the existing roots of a Canada thistle plant. Additionally, it can produce up to 5,000 seeds per flower head, allowing it to quickly dominate organic agricultural fields. Because of the intensity of this plant, there will be a need for integrated weed management, which will combine mechanical, cultural, and biological controls for the long-term suppression of this weed in organic systems. Today we'll be talking about one methodology, which is the use of diverse cropping rotations. Today, the question we will be looking at is, do diverse cropping rotations suppress Canada thistle growth in organic agricultural systems? So this question is one aspect of a 4-year study being conducted that looks at cultural, mechanical, and biological controls for the long-term suppression of Canada thistle. Today, I will be highlighting specifically the results from the first 2 years of this study, specifically in regards to cropping rotations. I also hope to highlight the trajectory of the final 2 years of this study. In total, there were 8 rotational treatments that were used in this study. These were applied across 8 different sites in the state of Montana. 6 of these sites were smaller collaborator farms, and 2 were larger research farms, which included the Central Agricultural Research Center in Moccasin, as well as the Fort Ellis Research Farm in Bozeman. At our smaller collaborator sites, rotational treatments 1, 4, and 7 were applied, with a 4th rotation of that farmer's choice. At our 2 large research farms, all 8 rotational treatments were applied. As I mentioned earlier, I will be discussing the results from the 2019 and 2020 growing seasons. Specifically, I will be looking at the data from the Central Ag Research Center and 3 of our smaller collaborator farms. A bit about methodology before we begin. This is an example of crop rotations at one of our small farm sites. As you can see, it incorporates rotational systems 1, 4, and 7 in red, blue, and green, with a 4th rotation of that farmer's choice in orange. This is a randomized block design that allowed for 4 replications of each treatment at each site. This is an example of our frames that we used for sampling in each plot. We took 6 1 by a ½ meter squared frames for each rotational plot. From these frames, we sampled 3 rows of crops as well as 4 inter-row spaces, which included Canada thistle as well as non-target weeds. From these frames, we collected crop and thistle biomass and density, as well as the biomass of non-target weeds. Frames were placed with an allowance of a 1 meter buffer on any side of the plot to avoid edge effects that could potentially skew our data. Additionally, there was a middle aisle left untouched that was utilized for yield estimates at each of our sites. On the right is a photo of someone sampling wheat in a field of Canada thistle. There you can see the 3 rows of wheat as well as the 4 inter-row spaces. So now for some results. We initially analyzed results by looking at the average change in thistle biomass by rotation for each site. Here we're looking at the results from the Central Agricultural Research Center, which was one of the large farms that received all 8 rotational treatments. In this graph, you can see the rotations at the bottom, labeled 1 through 8, as well as Canada thistle biomass on the left. Here we have 2019 results in gold and 2020 results in blue. Overall, there appeared to be a large increase in thistle biomass from 2019 to 2020 across all rotational treatments. In fact, there was only a decrease in 4 out of roughly 80 rotational plots, and one plot was for rotation 3, one plot was in rotation 4, one plot was in rotation 5, and one plot was in rotation 7, which is telling us that there is not a certain outlier showing a decrease since it was one in each rotation. Again, there are some reasons that we could see this large increase in thistle biomass. At the Central Ag Research Center, thistle was seeded in the 2018 growing season, which meant in 2019 the perennial only had 1 year of growth. In 2020, however, it would have acquired 2 years of growth and perhaps had a much larger biomass because of that. Additionally, in the summer season of 2019, the pink lady butterfly decimated thistle biomass at this site. It was a pest to the thistle and could have severely decreased the biomass. In 2020, this pest was not present, which again could lead to this skewing of results we see with much higher biomass in the 2020 season compared to 2019. Overall, increasing plots at the site, which was nearly all of them, went up by about an average of 60 grams of thistle, which is fairly significant. And of our 4 plots that showed a decrease, they went down by an average of about 45 grams of thistle. Now on to the results from 3 of our collaborator sites, and these were slightly more promising than the results from the Central Ag Research Center. Here we have the Heinbaugh Farm, which showed a decrease in thistle biomass across all rotations and in every plot from 2019 to 2020. Again, looking at this graph, we have results from 2019 in yellow and results from 2020 in blue. You can see that thistle biomass decreases pretty significantly in all rotations from 2019 to 2020, which is the opposite of what we saw at our large farm site. Most especially, you can see a large decrease in rotation 4 specifically. However, across all of them, the average decrease was about 60 grams of thistle, which again is a fairly significant number. The results next we have are for the Bailey Farm, which indeed showed actually a slight increase in overall thistle biomass, so a little more similar to the results from our large farm site. The complete data we have is only for rotations 4 and 7, and unlike the previous Heinbaugh Farm, which is another small farm, you can see that rotation 4 actually showed a very large increase in thistle biomass from 2019 to 2020. So rotation 4 on the left there showed an increase of almost 100 grams of thistle, with rotation 7 showing a small increase but not fairly significant. And finally, we have the results for our third and final farm, which is the Deacon Farm. Here we saw more mixed results across plots, with certain plots showing a decrease in biomass from 2019 to 2020, but most again showing that increase from 2019 to 2020. And again, like the Bailey Farm, we saw the largest increase in rotational treatment 4 by about 70 grams. The other 2 treatments, rotational treatment 7 and the Farmer's Choice, had a negligible effect between the 2 years. So where does this leave us for the future of diverse cropping rotations as a method to combat invasive Canada thistle? First and foremost, it's important to know that rotational treatments are more preventative than curative. When utilizing integrated weed management, it's important to know that the effect of a method like diverse cropping rotations could likely be enhanced or improved upon with the use of biological or mechanical controls in conjunction. Additionally, as I mentioned earlier, it is important to know that seasonal differences will make potentially a large difference when looking at results, especially when looking at results from just 2 years. As I mentioned earlier, at the Central Agricultural Research Center. In 2019, Canada thistle only had 1 year of growth, and additionally was decimated by the pink lady butterfly. In the 2020 growing season, the pink lady butterfly was not present, and the Canada thistle had 2 years of growth, which could lead to the stark increase in overall biomass we saw from 2019 to 2020. Finally, it's important to know that there are fairly large climate differences between all of our sites. This graph on the right shows mean thistle biomass at each site at the start of the study when compared to annual precipitation and mean annual temperature. As you can see, there was a wide range of initial thistle populations, as well as a wide range of mean annual temperatures and annual precipitation. And these can play a huge role when determining the success of cropping rotations, as well as the initial presence of thistle populations. A better visual, perhaps, could be the map of average annual precipitation with a selection of our farms on it. As you can see here, for example, the Deacon and Heinbaugh farms receive very little annual precipitation. This is especially noticeable when compared to our larger research farms like Clark or the Fort Ellis Research Farm in the Gallatin Valley, which both receive significantly more precipitation than our small farm sites. And this is basically to say that the impact of cropping rotations and initial thistle populations certainly are impacted by climate, as well as variances like soil and mean annual temperatures. And these can all lead to the variance of results that we saw today. And we will take into consideration these variations moving forward in the final 2 years of the study. And finally, it's most important to know that these are preliminary results from 2 years of data from a limited selection of our sites. And going forward, we will hope to combine mechanical and biological controls into these results, as well as have a full range of data to analyze. Before I finish, I'd like to acknowledge again Tim Seipel, Chris Larson, Perry Miller, and Patrick Carr for their guidance and help with this project, as well as the Bailey, Deacon, and Heinbaugh farms for their participation, and finally Dan Jaczynski, Toby Lepicello, and Daniel Huck for their help. I thank you for listening today and look forward to any questions you might have.